Listeners, welcome back to the Cancering Show Season 3. I cannot tell you how excited I am to be back in the studio and to be bringing to you all of these stories and patients and doctors and new technologies. There have just been so many changes since the last time I was in the studio, and this season in particular, we are focusing on the community of cancering. We know that everybody experiences cancer and therefore is cancering in some way, whether you are the patient, a family member, a care support person, or volunteering. And we want you to have as much information as you need to make the cancering journey not just a moment in time, but a transformative process that creates good in your life and in the lives of those around you. So we are bringing you not just the same wonderful stories and inspirational moments, but we also have a special treat for you this season. We are going to be highlighting community cancer organizations that partner with the USA Health Mitchell Cancer Institute and that you will find in communities across the country and around the world that work together to prevent, treat, and improve the lives of cancer patients throughout their cancering journey.
I've had a lot of doctors through the years, and I can't tell you how important communication is, and I cannot tell you how important it is for the patient to be engaged with the doctor and to ask questions, no matter how stupid you think they might seem. You've got to put your mind at ease. You've got to get the information that you need. And so I highly recommend and would almost beg people who are seeing their doctors to ask questions. And if the doctor's impatient with you, you just tell him, hey, listen, I've got to know.
Hello, Cancering Show fans. We're so excited to be back here on the Cancering Show, and we're so excited to have you back here with us. Today on the show, we have longtime sports broadcaster Mike Raita, along with his surgeon, Dr. Marty Heslin. Mike Raita is a 35-year veteran of TV sports broadcasting, winning multiple awards over his 27 years spent in Birmingham. His career as a sportscaster included breaking several big Alabama stories, including Alabama coach Stallings' decision to retire, Coach Francione's departure, and Coach Shula's firing. After leaving broadcasting, Mike spent several years in advertising agencies and teaching before being tapped by Senator Tommy Tuberville to communicate with his constituents over 12 counties. We're excited to welcome Mike and his surgeon, Dr. Heslin, to give us the play-by-play on his cancering journey, his survivorship, and what's next for him. Cancer is just something that we all have to recognize, acknowledge, cope with, live with, struggle with, rage upon, crush, and even thrive with. This show is more than knowing and fighting or beating cancer. It's more than just relaying science, hope, and technology. Together, our purpose is to demystify cancer, take away as much fear out of the diagnosis, treatment, and process as we can, defeat its grip on our lives. This is the Cancering Show. Mike, welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you.
Well, it really is a pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate you asking me.
So we're going to start by taking our listeners to that day you're covering the national championship in 2010, but something's not quite right.
Well, you know, it actually started several months before. I was having trouble urinating, and so I went to a urologist. And during my visit to the urologist, they did a prostate exam, and they sent me away saying everything was fine. Here's some Flowmax. Come see if it doesn't get better. Well, this was the middle of football season, and being a sportscaster in Birmingham, Alabama, my days were pretty filled up. I was working 6 days a week, oftentimes 10, 12 hours a day. So, you know, I was traveling on weekends to football games, whether it be at Auburn or in Tuscaloosa or wherever the road game was that was bigger for me to cover. So I got busy, and I never went back, although I did continue to have the problems. And I started losing weight. And then in December, my wife decided to have an open house for Christmas. And the open house invitation read, come by, have a cup of cheer, wish you a Merry Christmas, and we'll see you later.
Yes.
It did, not in so many words, but that was the essence of the invitation. Well, these people got there at 4, and at 9 o'clock, they still weren't gone.
Welcome to Birmingham, Alabama.
And at 9:30, I pulled my wife aside, and I said, hey, Rhonda, I said, you've got to get these people out of here, because if you don't, I'm going to be really rude, because I was dying. little did I know, literally. But I was dying. I was so tired and just ready for everybody to go. Well, as you know, Alabama won the SEC championship game. They made it to the national championship game out in California. And while I was in California, I really felt badly. It was the time change really screwed with me. As I mentioned, I had lost a lot of weight. I was really having trouble using the bathroom on both ends. And so it was just very difficult time. And when I got back, I had to go into the hospital because I also have a heart condition. And they wanted to put me on a different medication. And the medication that they wanted to put me on, they were curious to see how it would react with other medications that I was on, so they asked me to stay overnight. So I went to the hospital for that, and while I was there, I said, hey, could I get a colonoscopy while I'm here? And the doctor, the cardiologist, goes, why do you want to have a colonoscopy? He said,
I'm not that kind of doctor.
Nobody asked to have a colonoscopy, and I'm not that kind of doctor. So I said, well, I think I have cancer. And he goes, you really think you have cancer? I said, I know I have cancer. And he goes, well, yeah, we can make that happen. So I spent the night. The next day I had the colonoscopy after I did all the prep work and everything. And I remember after the colonoscopy, I was still on the table sort of waking up. And the guy who had given me the colonoscopy looked at me and he goes, yeah, good chance you have cancer. You were right. And I think the next day they called me in to meet with Dr. Marty Heslin. And I'm glad I got that introduction.
Well, I'm so glad you advocated for yourself. We talk a lot about that on the Cancering Show, really saying, finding someone who's going to listen and say, this is what I think is going on with me.
Yeah, I was lucky. I had good doctors, and my cardiologist was very attentive to my needs, and he knew that I knew my body. And so when I told him that I thought there was something drastically wrong, he listened, and he arranged that colonoscopy on very short notice and made it happen, and I'm thankful he did. I'm disappointed in the initial diagnosis, or lack thereof, back in October, but as they say, all's well that ends well.
We do talk a lot about patients who go to one or two doctors before they end up in the hands of a cancer specialist.
Well, the thing that I'm most disappointed in myself, because I had the symptoms. I saw the signs. I was too busy to do anything about it. And so I tell people all the time, if you feel like there's something wrong, don't let anything get in the way. I know you've got ball games that you want to go to, or you've got family obligations, or you've got a job that takes you away from home. Make time. Do what you need to do.
That is the best advice, and yet it's so hard. By the time December rolled around, it sounds like you knew there was something really wrong.
Yeah, I think, the difficulty I was having using the restroom, but then also the weight loss. I always say that cancer was the best diet I ever went on. I lost 20 pounds, and I actually look pretty good. If I hadn't felt so poorly, I would have been very happy, but I just felt bad.
And so you're in this high-stress job, and you get this diagnosis. How do you piece it all together?
Well, I told the people who would immediately be affected by any absence that I had doing chemo and radiation, I told those people, and that was a small group, maybe 2 or 3, and then I told my supervisor, and I swore them to secrecy, and I trusted them to keep my confidence, which they did. I did not want to have to answer the questions. I did not want to make people uncomfortable when they found out I had cancer. A lot of times people don't know what to say to you. Oh, I'm praying for you. And that's wonderful. And people need to hear that. They do. But on the other hand, I didn't want to make people feel uncomfortable. I kept it secret until I knew I was going to be off the air for 8 weeks. And then the night before I was going to be off the air for 8 weeks, I made the announcement on television. I didn't go into particulars. I just said I'd been diagnosed with cancer. I've been undergoing chemo and radiation. I'm about to have some surgery, and I'll be off the air for about 8 weeks, but I'll see you after that.
I can't imagine that moment, to have experienced all of the treatment in secret, in silence. And I think it's so interesting that you said to make other folks feel uncomfortable. We hear patients say that all the time, that there is this, what are they going to say to me kind of moment. And then all of a sudden, a big announcement. I mean, this is not each of us telling our family. This is you telling the entire greater Birmingham area you have cancer. What was that like to then open up to a whole community?
Well, the hardest part about the whole thing was telling my mother. And this is one of the reasons why I decided to keep it secret, was because of her reaction. Of course, immediately she starts crying. And then she wants to come to Birmingham. She lives in Arizona. And she and my dad want to come to Birmingham to make it better. And which would have been the absolute worst thing that could have happened, because she would have disrupted our lives. It would have been something that I would then think about every day, because that would be the only reason that they were there. So when I told the masses, if you will, it wasn't a big deal. That was before social media, really. So I didn't have to worry about that. I got some very nice emails. I got some very nice handwritten notes. And, I had a kindergarten class in Tuscaloosa, send me a bunch of drawings and a bunch of get well wishes, which was really special. And then I had so many people during the process, during that 8 weeks, they'd see me out in public and they'd say, hey, would you mind if our church put you on the prayer list? Our Bible study group is praying for you. That's very humbling. And it's so uplifting to know that people cared about you. And I think obviously that helps in your mental frame to help give you even more motivation to want to do what the doctor says, to follow the regimen that he has put forth, to listen to any advice that he has, and then most of all, to keep a positive attitude.
Absolutely. I think those are all great points and things that we talk about a lot. We also are talking a lot this season about the community that you surround yourself with in cancer treatment. I think yours is an extra large version of that.
Well, like I said, it was just a lot of positive reinforcement. And I think that's the one thing that people underestimate. Dr. Heslin was matter of fact and honest, but he was also positive. And you can be both. When someone is able to deliver a diagnosis of colorectal cancer and deliver it with a sort of an attitude of, yes, this is what you have, but this is how we're going to approach it and how we're going to fight it, it's so comforting. It makes it easier.
Absolutely. I love what you said, that you can be truthful and honest and be hopeful at the same time, even when you're facing a really tough diagnosis.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's a perfect place for us to take a break. When we come back, Dr. Marty Heslin will be joining us. As I mentioned at the start of this episode, in Season 3, we are talking about the communities surrounding cancer. In each episode, we are going to be highlighting a cancering partner, someone who helps to build the community of cancer around the patient and their family, somebody who provides support or extra help. This week, it's the American Cancer Society. The American Cancer Society makes sure no one feels alone on their cancering journey by providing continuous support with a 24/7 helpline for those seeking cancer information, answers, and hope. Do you have questions about treatment options or side effects? Do you just need a friendly ear? Call 1-800-227-2345, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The American Cancer Society is proud to partner with the USA Health Mitchell Cancer Institute to ensure that cancer patients never miss their treatment by providing funding for free rides to medical appointments and free places to stay for those traveling to receive treatment. When it comes to cancer, the American Cancer Society provides support that always hits close to home. For more information, visit cancer.org. Dr. Heslin, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you having me here. I'm a little uncomfortable sitting with two friends and being so formal.
I know. Hey, when you see in person, I call you Marty. When I'm speaking to someone else, I always call you Dr. Heslin. I do feel like you're my friend. I talked about him being direct and to the point, but doing it in a way that makes you feel confident in his abilities. Well, I had gone through chemo. I had gone through radiation, and I felt great. I was using the bathroom fine. The tumor had shrunk. I felt great. So I go to see Marty, and I say, Marty, he goes, how do you feel? I said, I feel great. Everything's working. Man, I'm smooth. And I go, I don't really need to have this operation, do I? And he goes, no, you don't need to have the operation. I went, fantastic. That's the best news I could hear all day. You'll be dead in a year, but you don't need to have the operation.
I don't remember saying that. I think your wife, Rhonda, his peripheral brain that came to the interview, of course, or the consultation, she'll say that I did. And I might have. It's not outside the realm of possibilities, but you went for the operation.
Well, here's the thing, is he knew he could say that to me because we had that kind of relationship where he could be blunt, he could be matter of fact with a tinge of sarcasm, right? And I would get it. Now, there are some patients he would say that to and they would melt and they would wilt. But I think that's a great thing about Marty is he's able to read the room.
Yes.
And so he knew what he could say to me. And that was, very sobering. Okay. I said, I think I answered with, all right, well, let's have the operation then. And so I had the operation.
Yeah, and have done great. I mean, what are we, 13 years down the pike?
Yeah.
And all because you asked.
Well, it's funny. I don't know if I can say this on this podcast.
We'll find out.
But, I think I was on the table, about 8 or 9 hours?
It was a while.
And when people ask me about my doctor, Marty, I say, well, yeah, Marty, man, he worked his ass off to save my ass. Literally. I mean, literally, right? Literally, he saved my ass.
We did. And it was well worth it.
So I just said it.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
I love it.
You can edit it out if you need to.
That's right.
So I wanted to know kind of how you get that fight to do the surgery, recover from an 8-hour operation after chemo, after radiation. We have similar treatments in my specialty in gynecologic cancers, and it's really hard to get through a surgery after that.
Well, I worked on deadline every day. Every day I had 3 deadlines. I had a 5 o'clock deadline, a 6 o'clock deadline, and a 10 o'clock deadline. And there were times where I didn't think I was going to make my deadline. I really didn't. And it's highly stressful. But somehow, you put your head down, you get through it, and you do it. And that's sort of the attitude that I took with this treatment. I knew I'd have to do chemo. And chemo, I almost feel guilty sometimes because chemo wasn't really bad for me. I didn't struggle at all. The radiation toward the end got to be uncomfortable, but I only missed 1 day of work during that time, and I was pretty proud of that. Now, there were times in between the 6 o'clock news and the 10 o'clock news that I would maybe sleep for a half hour with my head on my desk because I was tired. But other than that, I got through it pretty easily. And like I said, there's almost some guilt that I feel because of that when I hear these horror stories of these people who go through the chemo and really struggle with it.
I will say, we talk to patients all the time. It's totally, very individualized. And we want patients to feel that. We want patients to know that they can go to their doctor and say, I feel terrible, and know that there's more that we can do. I never want somebody to think that feeling terrible on chemo is the norm, because we don't want to think that it is. The goal is for 21st century chemo to not be that bad and to be palatable, and that those symptoms are manageable.
Agreed. Yep. And it's getting to the end of the journey about active cancer treatment, and then how you get into survivorship, and then managing all the other pieces of it, the late side effects, is this going to happen to me again, or how do you manage that kind of stuff? Like, what was your strategy?
I never worried about it.
We got through this, and then people talk about, well, you're a cancer survivor now. What does that mean? How did you manage that?
I honestly, Marty, I honestly don't know. I never, I tell people all the time, I never thought about dying, and until you said you'll die in a year. Then I went home and I got drunk. No, I'm teasing. I'm kidding about that. But I never thought about dying. That was, I always felt like, well, if I was going to die, I'm going to die. I had a heart condition, which was, fairly serious, and I still have to service that every day. So it was already in my head that I probably wouldn't live, like my father lived till he was 97 years old, or 98. I probably wouldn't live till I was 98 years old. I already had deduced that. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to do what I can do, follow the directions of my doctor, do all the treatments that he tells me to do, try to do the right thing when I'm away from his care and I'm, in my normal life, try to reduce my stress, which didn't work until I left that job. But And Marty, you might be able to speak to this better than I, but I do believe that stress, I might have been genetically predisposed to having this cancer. I might have been genetically predisposed to having a heart condition, but I really believe that my stress in my job exacerbated all of that.
Right. And certainly there are stressors in everybody's life, but we've learned so much about the immune system and how that communicates with the other parts of your body in cancer surveillance. So it certainly could be true. And on one hand, we poo-poo it and just say everybody's got stress. On the other hand, our knowledge about the immune system in the last 5 years has exploded, and you certainly could be right. I'll tell Rhonda that you actually have a chance of being right about something, okay?
Exactly.
No, I mean, that's what I was going to say. I think the increasing body of evidence says that that's actually factual, that we know rising cortisol levels lower your natural immune response and your killer T cells and those kinds of things. And for those reasons, your body's own ability to fight everyday cancer cells that might be floating around are lower in really high stress environments.
And just getting back to the blunt thing, I know I probably said this when I was here last time, and Jennifer's going, all right, yeah, I've heard this before. But, nobody escapes death. And if you tell me that's too blunt and it makes you feel bad, I'm sorry, but it's the truth. Right. And my message, and I'd be interested what your message might be. Well, you kind of said it. You figured, all right, I'm headed that way. But if you go with, which we all are, we're all terminal. And the bottom line is if you're heading that way, it's what you do at that time.
Right.
It's not that you're going to escape death. It's what you do between now and then. So what's your message to people?
Well, my message is don't wallow in it. And I know that sounds cruel because, but I do think, and if I'm getting off on a soapbox here, I apologize, but I do think that our society is starting to reward victimhood. That we hold people who are suffering from illnesses, and we almost hold them on a pedestal, and we make it almost popular to be sick or a victim instead of saying, hey, you know what? Deal with it. Dying is part of living, and you have to deal with what is being given to you, and you have to deal with it the best way possible. And that's what I try to do. I like I said, I just wanted to do what he told me to do it as religiously as I could, and then the chips would fall where they may. And you're right, you do have some realizations, that you're not going to live forever. That's we all know that back in the deep recesses of our mind. But when it's brought to the forefront, you have some realizations and you try to change some things. I wasn't successful changing a lot of things. It wasn't until probably the last 5 years after I lost my stressful job that I became a better person. But my hope would have been I would have become a better person after my cancer diagnosis.
Now, I have to ask what you mean by that. I think you're a pretty nice guy, and people really appreciate everything you've done for Birmingham, for sports, for so many things. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think sometimes I'm harsh, or I was. I was pointed, maybe too critical at times of people or of situations, and not as understanding, because I felt like I had a lot of pressure on me, so I wasn't going to be tolerant of anyone else. I wasn't maybe in tune with what they were feeling. So I just think I'm better in that regard. I could be lying. Rhonda might tell you I'm lying, but I feel like I'm a better person I was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
You were never not a good person around me, but I was never the subject of your work.
You held my future in your hands.
Well, no, it's true. But I'd like to be interested, Jennifer, how do we transmit messages like that in what you're doing? Like, tell me about how we get the insights that Mike has and make it so that people have access to those insights.
Well, I think the Cancering Show is one way. I think so much of what you say is relatable. We hear it from other patients. We hear it in our offices all the time. I have one caveat. I do let people wallow in it for 3 months. So not the 3 months during treatment.
Yeah.
You get 3 months after you're done with treatment to really be sad and grieve. It's part of the healing of that wound. And that's true. We say, it's PTSD, like a troop returning from war, that you have to heal that wound or it festers and can pop up again. And then after that, you get on with it, as everybody says. And that doesn't mean don't do the things you need to heal yourself emotionally as well as physically. I think there's so much to say for that. and to listen to your body, to hear other people's stories, to share stories, whatever people need. But I think what you said is so poignant. I think for so many people, this is a wake-up call that you never know what somebody else is going through. And for each of us in our own lives, we're busy, we're stressed, we're each interacting with another busy, stressed individual who might be caring for someone with cancer at home or has a child who's sick with some regular old illness. And I think being in our line of work and the experiences that you've had just put a whole nother spin on it that people don't know. Yeah. And, even your talk about having the main part of your treatment be almost completely in secret. And I'm sure somebody was like, God, Mike must have been out tearing one up last night. He's sleeping with his head on his desk. And you're like, yes, I do have toxins riding through my body, but not the kind you think.
Not the kind I'd like to have.
Right.
Yeah, I think people handle things different ways. And I don't think there's a right way or a wrong way. It's whatever works for you. And that just is the way I handled it. I remember before surgery, Marty, he comes in, he visits with you, and he said, now, there's 90% chance you're going to have a colostomy bag for the rest of your life. Do you remember this one?
I don't remember 90%.
90%.
Did I say 90%?
He said 90%. There's a 90%.
Check with Rhonda on that one.
That's what. She would know. She's got a memory like an elephant.
Okay.
I'm telling you, I know firsthand. But he said there's a 90% chance you're going to have a colostomy bag for the rest of your life. And I told him, I said, man, I don't want that. Just don't even do the surgery. I don't want that. He goes, it'll be fine, but there's that chance. I was really disappointed. When I went into surgery, I was really disappointed. And I was adamant, Marty, I really don't want that. I really don't want that. You remember that.
Well, that's not unique.
Yeah.
I know it feels unique.
It felt unique. It sure did.
Well, not everybody's 90%, but it wasn't that it was unique. It was just the realities of it. And I don't want to tell you something that I could potentially not deliver. That's all.
And he said, if you wake up and you have your colostomy bag on the left side, then it's permanent. Is that right? If you have it on your right side, it's temporary. I woke up, I looked down, it was on my right side.
Yeah. I
was like, oh my gosh, that was so awesome. Now, that's not to say that I'm perfect. I still have issues, that I have to be cognizant of every day. I have to make preparations for things that, the normal person doesn't have to make preparations for. But that's fine. If I'm operating at 75% or 80%, that's better than 0%.
And you know what it's like to have a colostomy. So today, would you rather go back and have the temporary colostomy or the way you are now?
It depends on the day, Marty.
Oh,
it
so there are days. Okay,
there are days that I wish I had the bag. Yeah, and my puppy Suede, who is now 14 years old, wishes I had the bag because he used to use it as a pillow when he'd lay on my lap. That's a true story, too.
Yeah, no, it is. Now, listen, I think one of the other things that's important, if I could say to people, it's try to seek ways to communicate that aren't necessarily, like, set people up for understanding what's going to happen without me being there to tell you. Because you knew, like, I try to tell people up front and communicate, all right, you want a long operation, not a short one. What? Wait, I want a short one. No, a short one means I couldn't do anything.
Right.
So everybody wakes up and looks at the clock.
Right.
And because then their family doesn't have to tell you. Like, you wake up, you feel which side it's on. You're like, oh, all right, now I get it. But you'd prepare yourself so that, again, it's not me going out talking to your family coming telling you, and you not knowing what's going on.
Right.
It's better to prepare you in ways that you can figure it out when you're awake enough to figure it out. And that's just an example of that.
I've had a lot of doctors through the years, and I can't tell you how important communication is, and I cannot tell you how important it is for the patient to be engaged with the doctor and to ask questions, no matter how stupid you think they might seem. You've got to put your mind at ease. You've got to get the information that you need. And so I highly recommend and would almost beg people who are seeing their doctors to ask questions. And if the doctor's impatient with you, you just tell him, hey, listen, I've got to know. I want to know the answers to these questions. I know you've got other patients, but right now, you're my doctor. You're not his doctor next door. You're my doctor, and I need your undivided attention for 15 minutes. And most of the time, they'll give it to you.
Yeah, absolutely. The other things you guys have mentioned, having your peripheral ears with you, another family member, making a list of those questions so that you're not going to leave the room until those are answered.
And taking a notepad with you.
Taking notes.
So I got a question for both of you. You're both media people. We're pushing stuff out for people and thinking what they might need. If we're going to create something that has insight that we package up and send out to people, what's the idea on a feedback loop, or how do we get information back to say, good job, bad job, because you're pushing media out, but it's not to a live audience. What's your strategy to get information so you can be better?
I love that you said that. And to quote my 8 and 10-year-olds, when they pretend to do YouTube videos, don't forget to like and share. We really are trying to get our cancering show out there. We want more people to listen. We want to get your feedback on comments on our Facebook page and website. But we also are doing a couple of unique segments this year where we're going to collect listener questions through any of those media. And we hope you will submit your questions, and we'll do 2 full episodes where we just answer our listeners' questions.
Thank you.
That's a great idea.
So, Mike, we wanted to know a little bit more about your treatment journey, in particular, your best day and your worst day.
Well, the worst day was before I was even going under treatment. It was the day that I had to call my mother. You know how moms are. You're a mom, and you know how your wife is. If Ryan or Lucas or Danny calls, Amy to say, hey, I've been diagnosed with stage 4 colorectal cancer, Amy's probably going to have a come apart. Although she may not, because she's married to you. But my mother had a come apart, and that was really hard. Trying to managing her emotions, that was difficult for me. And I told her, I said, Mom, I don't need your sympathy. The tears, while I understand them, they're doing me absolutely no good. I just want positive reinforcement. So that was probably the worst day. The best day was when I woke up on the table and saw that the bag was on the right side. This was awesome. I got a great sleep during the procedure, right? Because the anesthesia was awesome, right? I'd just gone on the best diet of my life, although it was a painful diet. I lost 20 pounds, and so I woke up, man. I was feeling good. I looked good. I had the bag on the right side. Knew I'd get the reversal. I was in good shape. That was the best day.
That's awesome, and I love the idea of giving patients stuff they can look to for hints to see how the surgery went. I think those are great. So, Mike, we are curious a little bit. I want you to talk about your book. I love the title. I think it has to be the theme of your entire cancer journey, not just your book title.
Yeah, I wrote a book called The Show Goes On, and I worked with a guy in Cincinnati, Ohio, probably 35 years ago now, who used to tell me, hey, man, the show goes on with or without you, and it better be with you. In other words, don't be late. Don't screw it up, because you're going to be out of work. So that's where that title comes from. And I used to say that to the guys in my office. Hey, the show goes on with or without you. I had an intern one time that I actually fired because he didn't show up for a couple of weeks. And when he came back, I said, hey, man, show goes on with or without you. It went on without you. We don't need you. See ya. And he goes, what about my internship? This is where I'm talking about being harsh. And I'm a different person now. What about my internship? That's your problem. Working out with your professor. You didn't show up. It's a business where you got to show up. So anyway, so I started jotting down stories about my career. And I got down about 5 or 6 stories that were, in essence, chapters. And I sent them to my best friend since we were 6 years old. Tom Horn lived in Cincinnati. I emailed him to him, and he read them, and he goes, man, this is great. You ought to write a book. You ought to make a book out of this. And I said, nobody'd be interested in my book. And he goes, well, how did it make you feel when you wrote it? And I said, well, it made me feel good to get some things off my chest and to sort of reminisce about the good times and sort of pull back the curtain on local television and how unglamorous it really is and how these people aren't movie stars like you think they are, and they're just really normal people, and some of them aren't very smart. And it was a cathartic exercise for me, actually, because I had left my job because I didn't have my contract renewed. So I was able to get some of my emotions out. And I never went ahead and finished it. About 2 years later, my friend died of cancer. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and finish the book. Tom wanted me to finish the book, so I'm going to finish the book. So I did, and I include the whole chapter about my cancer journey. And the last line of the book is, the show goes on with or without you, and it's going on without me, and that's just fine.
Yeah. Well, I took it to really relate to the fact that you continued to work that whole time.
Yeah, that's what it all goes back to is, the intern who didn't show up for 2 weeks, the show goes on with or without you. And there's always this fear. Television is such a competitive business, or at least it used to be. There's always this fear that if you went on vacation, I never went on vacation for more than a week because I was afraid they'd figure out they could do it without me. And if they can do it without you, they may just end up doing it without you. So that's another point of that. The show goes on with or without you.
Well, I think it speaks so much to your tenacity and resilience. And I think that's a characteristic that a lot of cancer patients have, but that you have in spades,
well,
of
thank
course.
you. I appreciate that.
So, when we look at where you are now, what's the thing that you're looking forward to? What's next for you?
Going to Callahan's, getting a beer. No, I'm working for Senator Tuberville, and that's been really good. I've been doing that now for a year and a half. It's a great opportunity for me to try to give back to the community that embraced me. Listen, when I came to Birmingham in 1989, I was a bald-headed guy doing sports, and you just didn't see that in television back in 1989. It's more prevalent now, but you didn't see it back in 1989. I remember, in fact, being told in college, you'll never be on TV because you're losing your hair. And so there was always this battle, this effort to try to prove myself and to silence the critics. So that community embraced me for who I was, and they supported me through my cancer ordeal, which was very nice. After 5 years after the colorectal cancer, Marty detected some cancer in my lungs, a couple of spots that he said, why don't we go ahead and get those taken care of? So we did. Nobody really knew about that. I don't even think I mentioned that in my book. So, I totally switched careers, and now I'm able to try to maybe help some folks who were good to me through my time, and that's been a real joy.
And I hear from a lot of my patients, and I think I tell a lot of people this, there's physical recovery, the mental recovery, and then there is taking some of what you've experienced, whether in work or in life or in cancer, and turning it into positive change that really is the final piece of that cancer survivorship.
Well, I think our experiences defines who we are, and how we handle those experiences defines who we are. And I joke with my friends, I ask them, do you mow your own grass? And if they say no or yes, regardless of what they said, I said, well, you can tell a lot about a man who mows his own grass. We are who our experiences say we are. And so I like to think that I've sort of hard-nosed. I like to think that I'm tough. Now I like to think that I'm fair. I've always been honest, maybe to a fault. Certainly in my book, I was brutally honest at times and probably shared too much. But that's okay. I was fine with it. And like I said, I'm comfortable now with who I am. So,
well, I couldn't think of a better place to stop. We have so enjoyed getting to know you a little bit and so appreciate you sharing your time and your story.
Well, I just want to say the Mitchell Cancer Institute is so lucky to have Dr. Heslin, and I'll refer to him as Dr. Heslin in this regard. I mean, he truly does care about patient care. It's not just administration with him. Obviously, hospitals need to run smoothly, but his main focus is patient care. That's what he's best at. I think he'll admit that. So you guys are just so lucky to have him. And Lord knows, God forbid, if I ever got in a situation where I needed him again, I would take up residence in Mobile. I'd go live at my in-laws' house while I was treated.
I love it. And we are so lucky to have you here, Dr. Heslin, and at MCI. Thank you both so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
What a great episode with Mike Raita and Dr. Marty Heslin. Such a great way to start season 3. I loved watching the relationship between the patient and his surgeon that they have, the friendship that has formed. With any patient, you have connections with some more than others. And this time that we have with our patients can be fleeting. And when someone makes a real connection and has a long-term friendship, it's just a really special thing. And I feel so privileged to get to witness that firsthand. It's also such an inspiration to see Mike continue to show up in this really high stress job day in and day out through some really tough cancer treatments. I will tell you that as physicians, we are so inspired by what our patients go through and continue to put out good and wonderful things into the world. And I just want you to know, as you're listening to this, if you're going through treatment, you are inspiring us. And so we thank you for listening. We hope that you are inspired. We hope you find strength and joy in the message today and every time that we do this show. That's why we do it, because cancering affects us all.
Thanks, everyone, for listening to The Cancering Show with JYP, Dr. Jennifer Young-Pierce. Please subscribe, rate, and review this show on iTunes and anywhere else you listen to your favorite podcasts. Want us to deliver The Cancering Show to your email inbox? Contact us at cancering.com, and we can make sure you never miss an episode. We would love to know what you think about the show, or if you have any suggestions on topics you would like to hear. You can reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, and cancering.com. Till next time, be healthy, happy, and always thriving.
This show is brought to you by the University of South Alabama Mitchell Cancer Institute. MCI is a cutting-edge cancer research and patient center built to fight cancer smarter in Mobile and Baldwin County, Alabama. Our researchers and clinicians focus daily on the struggle against cancer, serving a potential catchment population of more than 4.1 million people, with a singular focus of advancing cancer diagnosis, treatment, and prevention throughout the Gulf Coast and beyond, with science, technology, and hope. Want to know more about the Mitchell Cancer Institute? Visit us at usamci.com or search for us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Mitchell Cancer Institute is a member of USA Health. To learn more about all of our hospitals, clinics, and services, visit usahealthsystem.com.